We're really excited to talk with you guys today. I think most of you guys saw my introduction video on Facebook, but I'm Mackenzie. I'm working in the Office of Innovation at Peace Corps headquarters in DC. And Duolingo is a new initiative throughout Peace Corps to help our invitees develop their language skills, gives us an understanding of where people's language skills are before they get to service. We also think that it's a great way to get into the habit of practicing a language. When you get to PST, you're going to be in language training 5 to 6 days a week, 4 to 6 hours a day. It can be pretty intensive, so if you're already in the habit of doing that, it can make things a little bit easier. Yeah, so just a little bit of background on Duolingo. Most of you guys have been using it, and you've been doing a really great job, and so we really are excited for you guys on that. But again, like I said, we've been using it to help prepare invitees for service. We're doing it currently in 17 countries, most of them Spanish-speaking, but we have a couple in Ukraine, French-speaking countries, and we're helping to develop other languages for the more specialized languages. That's about it. I wanted to let you guys know, so I know a large majority of you are coming in with a higher level of Spanish, so I wanted to give you guys kind of an idea of what you can do after you test out of the language training, or out of the skills, sorry. I'm looking to share my page here. So you guys can see here, this is what the Duolingo page looks like when you guys get on. So I'm logged in, I'm studying my French or my Spanish in your guys' case. If you guys click on the immersion tab, which should be at the top of your Duolingo page, it will take you to the immersion area, which allows you to go in and translate different documents that have been uploaded. It also allows you down here under the progress tab, you can choose whether you want to look at ones that have been finished, so you can see like translations that have been done correctly. You can go to needs to be translated, or you can go to needs to be edited or checked. So you guys can kind of play around with that if you guys want to continue to work on your Spanish, but you've already completed all the skills. Also, you can go on to your homepage where your skills are. And here you can see, so my basics French or whatever is a very low. So if it was really high, it would have this red color or gold color depending on your language all the way up to the top. So you can see as your skills decrease or you haven't practiced those skills over time, you can go in and, you know, re-practice or go in and redo some lessons that will help you like get that back up to full strength. So that's just some updates on Duolingo. And so now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Guatemala staff.
Great. Well, thank you, Mackenzie. It's great to see all of you hopefully watching this video later and joining in on this call. My name is Carolyn Beal. I'm the training manager here in Guatemala. And so I'll be working with you through your pre-service training program when you arrive in country. And we're excited to do this session with you all today, talk with you a little bit more about what the language learning is like here in country. But before we get into that, I want to introduce two of my colleagues who we have here with us today. We have one of our language and cultural facilitators, as well as one of our Peace Corps volunteer leaders. She's actually a third-year volunteer leader. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you, share their name, how long they've been with Peace Corps, and their favorite thing about Peace Corps. This is going to be a bilingual call, so Mirza is going to start, and she's going to do it in español.
Bueno, buenos días. Mi nombre es Mirza Gutiérrez y soy una facilitadora de lengua y cultura. Y para mí es un placer trabajar acá facilitando, ¿verdad?, el idioma a los voluntarios que están trabajando con nosotros.
¿Y cuántos años de experiencia tiene usted, Mirza?
Pues tengo ya un rato trabajando en Cuerpo de Paz. Voy a cumplir este año 20 años trabajando con Cuerpo de Paz.
Excelente. ¿Y su cosa favorita de Cuerpo de Paz?
Trabajar con los voluntarios, por supuesto.
Excelente. Great. And now I'm going to hand it over to Amanda, and she's going to introduce herself and tell you all a little bit about herself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Amanda Harvey. I'm a Peace Corps volunteer leader in the food security program here in Guatemala. This is my third year in Guatemala as a volunteer, well, now volunteer leader. And I work here in the office. And my favorite thing about Peace Corps is the volunteers as well.
Great. So Amanda was actually selected through a competitive process to become a third-year volunteer. Traditionally, volunteers serve for 2 years, but she's so passionate about food security that she decided to stay on for a third year, and we're so glad to have her. And as you heard, Mirza has 20 years of experience here in Peace Corps, and that is not uncommon amongst our staff. We have, I think, some of the most experienced language facilitators in Peace Corps worldwide, and they know this process in and out and are going to be great guides to you, not only through pre-service training, but during your entire 2 years of service here in Guatemala. So to start us off, I want to just give you a little bit of an overview of how our pre-service training program works. This Thursday and Friday, the majority of you will be taking a language proficiency interview, or what we call an LPI. So this is about a 30 to 40 minute conversation that you're going to have with one of our certified testers. At least one of you will be probably taking your exam with Mirza. And what that allows us to do is know what is your level of proficiency in using Spanish. And it's specifically measuring your oral ability. And so when you're going to go through that, the language instructor is going to take you through a variety of different conversation pieces, and they're going to push you in your language capacity basically until you start to feel frustrated and you don't have the structure and the words that you need in order to continue in the conversation. And what that's going to tell us is, what is your language level? We use what's called the ACTFL language proficiency system. So it has 4 basic levels. We have beginners, intermediates, advanced, and then a superior level. And what we want to see is that all volunteers by the end of our 10-week pre-service training program reach an intermediate mid-level of proficiency as a base level of proficiency to reach the field. What we see is at that level, you all are able to have conversations, you're able to keep yourself safe, you're able to keep yourselves healthy, and you're able to start in your community. Of course, that isn't a level where you're going to necessarily feel completely comfortable doing all of the activities in your project, but it's a base enough level to get you out to your community. So by the end of this week, we'll know what your language level is, where you start, and then we'll start working with you, providing you some additional tips on how to use Duolingo or other activities to continue to increase your language capacity. So once you arrive in country, you will then be assigned to a language class and a language community. And there you'll be working one-on-one with one of our language and cultural facilitators to increase your knowledge around the Spanish language as it's used here in Guatemala, learning Guatemalan specific vocabulary, also understanding Guatemala culture, and also just how to live and work here in this country. Because there's simple things like, how do I take a bus to go from point A to point B, which is very different than the way that you may be used to doing in the US. So they'll be with you the majority of the time and working with you to increase your skill set around everything you need to do to live and work. And I want to ask Mirza to provide us a little bit more information on what an average day in a language class could look like. That'll always depend on what's going on, what week in training is. And then she's going to tell us a little bit about some of the other activities that you will be engaged in during pre-service training. Entonces, Mirza, si nos puede escribir qué es un día típica y cuáles son algunas de las actividades que hacemos durante pre-service training.
Bueno, pero dependiendo, ¿verdad?, de el día, tenemos diferentes actividades. Una clase es muy dinámica. Trabajamos con estructura de gramática también, ¿verdad? Y tratamos de que muchas de las actividades vayan en función de una aplicación, ¿verdad? Entonces tenemos actividades donde salimos también fuera de la casa, de la familia, a hacer aplicaciones, por ejemplo, en el mercado, en una tortillería, con un agricultor, dependiendo de los temas que se estén enseñando ese día, ¿verdad? Pero tenemos también integración de temas técnicos, ¿verdad? Vocabulario, diferentes actividades que se realizan para que nuestros voluntarios apliquen y puedan usar lo aprendido en clase.
Excelente. ¿Y cuáles son algunas de las actividades integradas que realizamos durante Pre-Service Training?
Sí, tenemos también diferentes actividades, ¿verdad? Para aprender sobre aspectos culturales, visitas a museos, visitas a diferentes lugares de la comunidad o fuera también de la comunidad, ¿verdad? Tenemos también actividades, por ejemplo, como visita a Guatemala, una ceremonia maya también donde ellos participan y aprenden sobre aspectos profundos, ¿verdad?, de nuestra cultura. Tenemos también actividades técnicas, por ejemplo, un día cocinando con una familia en la comunidad, aprendiendo sobre temas de agricultura que ellos van a aplicar luego en su sitio.
Great. Thank you, Mirza. So one thing that's really important to note about our language training program is that during pre-service training, our focus is on Spanish. And that may be surprising to many of you, considering the wide variety of Mayan languages that we have here. That is not to say that we're not going to provide you the opportunity to develop your skills. But one thing that we do in Guatemala that's a little different than other countries is we wait for the site assignment process. You're going to receive your 2-year site, or where you'll live and where you'll work, during week 8 of pre-service training. And because there's such a variety of languages, currently we have volunteers serving in, I believe, 6 language areas. We can't start you with a Mayan language during pre-service training, because during the time that we're getting to know you, and you're also getting to know Peace Corps Guatemala, that area of the country where you might be assigned could possibly change. So what we do is, after site assignment, we provide an 8-hour orientation to a Mayan language. So we bring in Mayan language instructors, and they actually work one-on or in small groups with our volunteers to provide some of the basics in pronunciation, basic greetings, and a little bit of the culture. From there, we provide you resources to go to your community and locate a Mayan language tutor. And we ask you in your first several months to take a minimum of 20 hours of Mayan language tutoring. The idea behind this is for you to understand a little bit more the local culture, to be able to have the different greetings and some key technical words to use. But community to community, the need for Mayan language really differs. Our program is not set up to make you fluent in a Mayan language. All of the work partners that you will have at the Ministry of Health will have the ability to communicate with you in Spanish. In some communities, they'll be fully bilingual, both Spanish and Quiche, or Spanish and Cachiquel. And so what we'll ask you to do is, when you're working with populations that speak a Mayan language, is to work with them for translation, or even better, to assist them in the preparation of the health talks or the health interventions you're going to give. And they really be the stars shining out there, and you be the folks there cheerleading them on and helping them implement whatever the project is in the community. So will there be some language and cultural barriers? It will very much depend on your community and where you're assigned. But we will work with you little by little to help prepare you and look at what you need to do in terms of Mayan language. The majority of our volunteers take about 20 to 40 hours of Mayan language and pick up some different pieces that are able to help them be more integrated in the community. We do have some volunteers who come in with a high level of Spanish, or other volunteers who are just really highly motivated by both the need and their own passion for Mayan languages. And we've actually had volunteers get to an intermediate mid or an intermediate high level of a Mayan language, which is quite proficient conversationally. So just so you kind of keep that in mind regarding the Mayan language program. Right now, I want to invite Amanda to just share with you a little bit of her impressions of the language training program. What was it like for her as she was coming to country? I'm asking her to think back more than 2.5 years, but just to share some of her perspectives about Mayan, or the Spanish language, and then if she had any experience with Mayan language. So Amanda, why don't you share with them kind of your experiences?
Yeah, so I came in with a very low Spanish level. So I mean, the first couple months of living in Guatemala, and then especially my first couple months when I got to site, were challenging, I guess you could say. I remember when I tried to give my first health lesson, I don't know if I was just thinking about this to myself right now. I don't know if anyone actually understood a single word I said, but yeah, it was, I mean, I think that's the whole point of the process is you put yourself in challenging situations, and through that, you kind of start to learn how to work your way through them a little bit better. And if you are in, like Carolyn was saying, a more indigenous site that has a Mayan language as the first language, then that is a time, I think, when, yeah, you co-facilitate with your counterparts and have them kind of take the reins of whatever activity you're doing, because they're the ones who are going to be able to fully transcribe the information that you're trying to get out to whoever you're working with. So I'm trying to think of like a specific, I can't think of anything specifically that I could share that might be funny.
That's okay. Okay, that's great. So I think Amanda had, her own process in terms of language learning, but, regardless of where she came in, she is very, very proficient now in her use of language and is, working at a higher level within Peace Corps as a third-year volunteer, assisting other volunteers, creating trainings that are being done for volunteers at a regional and national level. So I think it's really impressive to see that, someone who at first might have felt really challenged by her language is excelling and doing an amazing job. So you should definitely feel proud of that.
And yeah, and I guess that's what I wanted to add. I think the best way, whether it is Spanish that you're trying to improve or an indigenous language, the best way I think for me that was to kind of challenge myself and improve was just being with my host family and trying to kind of converse just on a natural level. I think that's the best way if you are, especially if you're high in Spanish already and you're trying to focus on a third language, with your host family or local friends that you make, just kind of trying to talk with them.
Great. So with that, I'm actually going to ask Mirza to talk to us a little bit about the host family program, because that's the other part of language learning. We have formal language classes and activities, but part of your experience is immersion. As adult learners, you actually need to get out there and put it into action, make lots of mistakes, recognize those mistakes, and be able to correct them. That's the whole experiential learning process that Peace Corps training is based on. So, Mirza, ¿nos puede hablar un poquito de cómo es el programa de familias anfitriones durante preservicio y qué hacen las familias y qué pueden esperar los aspirantes de ese proceso de vivir con una familia guatemalteca?
Uh-huh. Bueno, nuestras familias están capacitadas, ¿verdad? Cuentan con mucha experiencia, son muy flexibles, pacientes, cariñosas y están abiertas siempre a tener a una persona más como miembro de su familia. Entonces, nosotros en el proceso de capacitación con ellos siempre estamos pidiendo, ¿verdad? Ese contacto con los voluntarios porque sabemos que es de suma importancia para su adaptación. Entonces, ustedes van a encontrar familias que les van a ayudar, ¿verdad? Hasta en aspectos lingüísticos, en corrección, por ejemplo, de pronunciación de vocabulario, ayudarlos en situaciones, cómo enfrentar diferentes situaciones que se les presenten también ya en su vida como voluntario. Entonces, van a tener una experiencia realmente interesante con las familias con las que van a vivir aquí en Guatemala.
Great, thank you. And then after pre-service training, you will go and live with another family for the rest of your 2 years. And Amanda, do you want to talk a little bit about that experience? What is that like for a volunteer?
Yeah, so each volunteer has kind of a different setup. Some people will be in a room in a family's house. I personally had more of a separate situation. I lived on a family compound. So when you walk into the main door, I had a little casita to the left, and that was kind of my little private area, and I had my own bathroom, and then they were all to the other side. But everyone kind of, you can make the experience your own. So you can, sometimes it's more of a landlord type relationship. Sometimes it becomes something very, very integrated, and you feel like another member of the family. It all depends upon the volunteer, the family, and your site. But I think most families are pretty, like Mirza said, really flexible for volunteers. And you can make it what you want it to be. My experience was great. My host family was always there for me when I needed them, but they also were 100% fine if I had other volunteers coming through and taking a look at what my site was like for the weekend. They were very understanding of my culture, but it was also, they also were always willing for me to come in to their birthday parties or weddings or whatever things they had going on as well. So it was a great exchange of kind of how I live as a single woman and volunteering in Guatemala, and what families like out in the rural Western Highlands of the country.
Great. So that's just a brief overview of our pre-service training program. We'll be holding some calls in the coming weeks to talk with you a little bit more about some of the specifics, and you're going to be receiving the Bridge to Service document. So please start looking at those pieces. But I think right now we want to just use the remaining time to see if there are any questions. And so Mackenzie, are there any questions or things that we can answer that might have come up?
I think the only thing that we had that people had asked about before was, are host families during training bilingual? And I think it was maybe English to Spanish, but I'm not sure. It might have been like Mayan language to Spanish. So if you want to kind of maybe address that. And then I think we had one other question.
Great. So there are some of our families where certain members may speak English because they've spent some time in the States, but that's definitely not the norm. We ask host families to speak with you in Spanish during training because you're here to expand your Spanish. There are a few families in training and then many families in site that may be bilingual, Spanish and a Mayan language. So that's not uncommon. I remember as a volunteer, my family actually spoke primarily to each other in Quiche. And so sometimes it was asking them, hey, can you help me understand what you all are talking about? Because I'm still learning Spanish. So it's definitely an experience that many volunteers have. But little by little, you'll pick things up and you'll move forward. But you shouldn't expect an English-Spanish bilingual family.
Great, thanks. Another question that we had, and I think you've answered several points of this question, but maybe you guys could talk about some difficulties working in a community where there is more of the Indigenous language spoken and what some of those challenges have been, and then maybe what volunteers have done to overcome that.
Great. I'm going to pass that to Amanda to speak from her experience and the experience of her colleagues.
Yeah, so that's not that uncommon. I worked in a really small aldea village in my town, and it wasn't uncommon to have, especially for the women. I was a maternal and child health volunteer for 2 years previously. It's not uncommon for them to only speak a Mayan language and have very, very little to sometimes no Spanish. So I think, and this is my personal opinion, others might feel differently, but I do feel that you need to, that's why we have our counterparts, and working with a counterpart who does speak the local language, I think is the most important thing you can do in those situations, because there's just no way that we can kind of express ourselves culturally appropriately and maybe with the language skills in a Mayan language, especially for me in working in maternal and child health. A lot of times when we are talking with the women, it's kind of over more sensitive topics. So you want to choose your words wisely. So I think working with your counterpart and kind of empowering them to take the lead in their local language and dialect to speak to the women on that personal level.
Great. Yeah, I think some of the other pieces you'll be introduced to them during pre-service training and then in subsequent trainings are using what we call the experiential learning cycle. So it focuses on taking adult learners, what those women already know and have, and then having them actually do something, have an experience, and then reflect on that experience, and from there gain new knowledge and apply it to their lives. So for example, one activity that many volunteers do that's very popular to talk about the importance of family planning is they play a game where they have two families, or they make more families. One family is a very large family with 10 members, and the other is a small family with 2. And each mother in the family is given a spoon, and there's a cup of beans, and she has to race the clock to try and get as many beans as possible for her family. So when the arbitrary amount of time, 2 minutes, 3 minutes is over, they ask the women to reflect. Okay, so you were able to get beans. This family who has 10 members and this family has 2 members, how many beans does each family member get? How does this relate to family size? How does it relate to family planning? And so allowing women to have these experiences and talk amongst themselves, you as a volunteer may be really supporting that work partner, as Amanda mentioned, to facilitate that. But it's using activities that are dynamic and that involve the participants to have them think about their lives and what they want to do with their lives and how they can make changes. And we're going to provide you a wealth of resources on how to do that once you all are here.
And I think that's a really good point, Carolyn, especially because I did come in at a lower Spanish level. So I kind of already felt like I had a bit of those barriers. So using a lot of, hands-on learning, a lot of posters, making cutouts, pictures, games, songs, puzzles, anything to kind of help you with the educational process that you're trying to give.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions that have popped up right now, but one question I would have is, in addition to the Duolingo, are there other things that the invitees can be doing to help prepare to immerse themselves in the culture, as well as like the intensive language training that they're going to have during PST?
Let's see what our LCF says about that. Mirza, ¿cuáles son algunas de las acciones preparativas que pueden hacer los aspirantes ahorita mientras que están esperando llegar a Guatemala? ¿Qué pueden hacer para seguir mejorando su nivel de español o estar listos a ser parte de la cultura guatemalteca?
Bueno, estamos escuchando, ¿verdad?, de que están dentro del programa de Duolingo, ¿verdad? Entonces ya tienen una noción del proceso de aprender español, ¿verdad? Algo importante es practicarlo, ¿verdad? Entonces, si ya tenemos el conocimiento, tenemos que practicar. Entonces, algo que va a pasar, ¿verdad?, cuando vengan acá a Guatemala va a ser eso, ¿verdad?, que van a tener una inmersión más real de la práctica de su español.
So maybe some things that are useful if you have the opportunity, if you feel comfortable getting reading material, challenging yourself to read in Spanish on a daily basis, even if that's just clicking around the internet. A lot of volunteers love taking their favorite book. Harry Potter is a very common one that many volunteers do. And they know that book inside and out in English, and so they buy it in Spanish and start reading it in Spanish. Tuning your radio station, if you have a Spanish-speaking radio station in your community. Just putting yourself in a situation where you're starting to be immersed. And if you have any colleagues or friends or family that are native Spanish speakers, spending time with them, asking them to, hey, let's go out for lunch and we're only going to speak in Spanish. Hey, let's, go out for drinks and we're only going to talk about my day in Spanish. And really just force yourself and try and push through those feelings of awkwardness, because that is going to be a key to your language learning success. Language learning is frustrating, no matter when you do it or who you are. It's exciting at the same time, but it's frustrating. And so if you can help push through that discomfort, it's going to be a really, really great bonus to you as a language learner.
Awesome, thank you. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now, so I want to thank you guys for your time, and hopefully it was helpful to all the invitees. And keep doing your Duolingo, and look forward to talking to you guys again.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks so much.